I want to make a knife. So the first thing you're going to need is some steel. This is 01 tool steel. It's great steel for knives, beginners mostly, but it's just a good steel in general. The only problem is it will rust. But if you take care of your blades, you shouldn't have a problem with that. As far as tools go, I'm going to be using a lot of them. Belt sander, drill press, angle grinder, Dremel tool, jigsaw. If you don't have any of this, it can still be done with a hacksaw and a file. The next thing you need to do is draw out your design. Now this is not going to be a very big knife. Here's a hammer to scale. Here's an even bigger hammer. Here's a golf club. Here's my ex-girlfriend. Here's my mixtape. Here's me. Just to get you an idea of how big this blade's going to be. Pretty much every time I draw something onto my steel, the next step is to cut it out. So angle grinder, I choose you. Once you've cut it out as much as you can with your cutoff wheel, swap out for a flat disc and keep going. Next part is to cut the coil into the blade. This part is optional and you can drill a hole in it beforehand, but I like to take a round file and just file it in myself. I don't want the coil to go too deep, so I'm stopping right there. Now for the holes. You have a whole lot of options as far as holes and pin placement goes on the knife. For me, I'm going with 2 1/8" pins and no lanyard hole at all. So just figure out where you want the holes to be and then center punch them. Now it's time to take it over to your drill press. Just chuck your right bit and drill away. Now I'm going to countersink those holes with a larger drill bit. That's looking good now. Once you've scribed your center line onto the edge, it's time to bevel it. I'm using this wooden jig that'll help me get a consistent angle on the bevel, but if you want to freehand it, go ahead. I'm going to be using my trusty belt sander to put the bevel on this jig, but you can use a file, angle grinder, really whatever you have. Now my bevel goes all the way to the back of the spine, and this will actually give you the best results as far as cutting goes. Another advantage of having the bevel like this is that you don't even have to worry if the line on the bevel is even with the spine. Now it's time for the heat treatment. You'll notice that this is all burnt right here. This happened whenever I was beveling the knife. I used to polish that out and make it shiny before I did the next step, but this is all going to be the same temperature anyway afterwards, so there's really no need to even polish that out. Now for this step, I have a lot of equipment here. Right now my gas forge is on burning acetylene. I have a screwdriver with a magnet on it right here. I have some vegetable oil down here. I have gloves, tongs, a fire extinguisher, a banana because I'm hungry. And I'm going to stick this knife into that forge. And whenever it gets kind of a dull cherry red color, when it starts to glow and it's no longer magnetic, I'm going to quench it in my vegetable oil. And that's going to make this knife really, really hard. Oh, that smells like French fries. The forge is off now. Still glowing on the inside. I'm not going to even be able to touch the outside of this for probably a day. But the blade is hardened. To test the knife to make sure it's hardened, you're going to want to file. Regular steel that's not heat treated or hardened will get bit into by file, as it's supposed to. But with a knife, as it's hardened, the steel should be just as hard as the file is. This file is not actually biting into the steel, it's just gliding along the surface. That's how you know this blade is hardened. Now this blade is really hard, but it's also really brittle. The next step of the heat treat is called tempering. I'm going to stick this in my oven at about 400 degrees for an hour and a half, and I'm going to do that twice. Uh-oh. My mom's cooking something. But it's at 400 degrees, so I'm sure she wouldn't mind if I just stuck this in here. Yeah, she'll never notice. And while that knife's in there, do whatever you want to pass the time until it's ready. Am I not pretty enough? The blade's back from tempering, so now it's time to put a finish on it. Now I'm going pretty simple for the finish. This belt sander is still set to the same angle as it was whenever I beveled the knife. So I'm putting this knife back at the jig, and I'm swapping this belt out with a 120 grit belt, and then I'm going to lightly polish it. Now that the blade looks like this, all nice and pretty, it's time to put a handle on it. I'm going simple again, and I'm putting an oak handle on this knife. Trace both ends of the tang onto the material, and then take your jigsaw or whatever you're going to use to cut the material, and do some very rough outlines of the shape. I'm using the tang itself as a template for the holes in the wood. Once I drilled the first hole, I'm going to set a nail in there to make sure that it's completely even for when I drill the next hole. I'm going to do that on both sides with both scales of the knife. Once your holes are drilled, your knife should fit together like this. I'm using a 3/16 drill bit to slightly countersink the holes for the peen pins I'm going to put in later. Now it's all up to you on how you want to shape the handle. I'm going to pin all this together with these nails and then just sand and file away at it until it's flush with the tang, and then I'm going to round out the wood until it looks really nice. Now it's time to glue and pin the handle scales to the knife. As far as pins go, I'm getting mine from brass rod. This brass rod was $7 at Ace Hardware. As you can see, it's pretty short now. This used to be a 3-foot stock. I've gotten so many knives out of $7 worth of brass, and I'm so happy. I'm a changed man. To find out what the length the brass rod needs to be, you need to take the width of your work and then add a couple millimeters, because we will be peening these pins. So I'm mixing my epoxies until it's the right color, and then once it's the right color, I'm just going to go ahead and start spreading it on the tang of the knife. Now you kind of have to move quickly because this stuff sets in 5 minutes. If you really want to take your time, you probably should invest in some 60-minute setting epoxy, but I'm good. This is fine. Now sometimes you would clamp up the knife and let the epoxy dry and cure, but I'm going to pin the pins, and that'll be enough to hold it together. That way I can just skip the drying process and keep working on the knife. Now for peening the pins in the knife, you have to be extremely careful. The problem is, if you're too rough on the pins, you'll actually crack your wood and splinter it and stuff. That looks real good. Now this is one of my favorite parts. Once the pins are peened, I'm going to run it through my belt sander. So now the blade looks like this. It's looking really good. The next step is to take a half round file and then cut in your finger groove. You come in like an angle and then just file away at it. This is looking really good. Now, normally I stain my handles on my knife, but I'm not making this for me. I'm making this knife for my mother, and she wants a really bright painted handle. So I'm gonna paint this handle and then I'll get back with you. Now with that done, the whole knife is done. All that's left to do is sharpening the knife, but then you're done. That's all I got for you today. Had a lot of fun making this knife. I got it all done with one day. Hit that like button and subscribe. Later.